My name is Ron Arad, which is an Israeli name. And this is my studio that produces all this furniture and pieces that you see here. And there's also an architectural office here from where we design buildings. We always lived between disciplines and between definitions. Artists would complain that what I do is design. Designers would complain that what I do is art. Architects would complain that it's design. I'm going to meet Brian Eno, who started life as a rock and roll musician, pop star. And I believe he attempted abandoning the field, and he hasn't managed to. Again, a case of someone living between disciplines. So that's why I'm interested in talking to him. I was given a set of questions here. The first one talks about your many hats, like singer, author, producer, lecturer, audiovisual technology, film composer, and perhaps other things I don't know. For me, there is a slight contradiction between your activity in what could be described fine art, the fine art world, and producing, and the work of, say, you too, that for me it's like a faded denim, sweaty, full stadia, for me it's like two different worlds that are almost mutually exclusive.
I think they are, yes. I think those two worlds spend a great deal of effort defending themselves against each other, because in a way their credibility relies on being different from one another and not being allowed to run together. For example, a good example of that is the so-called difference between design and fine art, which you must be aware of this fuzzy boundary. And it's very important for fine artists, in order to justify the extremely high prices that are charged for paintings, I think, to say, no, this is not design, this is something of a completely different nature. It's not just quantitatively different, it's of a different type. And this leaves out a lot of interesting things in the middle. Now, I think, of course, I'm mostly confused about what I'm doing most of the time, but sometime later it seems to make sense, things fit together. So I don't approach it as one vision and as one unified great work or anything like that. It always seems at the time I'm doing bits and pieces, but it always seems afterwards that they fit together, there's a logic to them. Right. And I understand something from here which makes sense over here. So I think as time goes on, I am consolidating some kind of philosophy. And it's a philosophy that embraces, in the same language, what used to be called high art and low art, for example, popular art and fine art, and passionate art and intellectual art as well. This is also a distinction that keeps being made.
But do you find you have a split audience? Because, say, if you think of someone like Jeff Koons, who plays on the theme of high art, low art, but clearly his audience is that of high art.
I think I do, yes, but I think there's also an overlap between them. I mean, one of the strange things is that I have audiences who don't know about a lot of the things I do. For instance, I had an exhibition recently in Copenhagen, one of several exhibitions I've had, and of course it had my own music in, and somebody came up to me and said, it's a very nice show, who did the music?
Right.
And I said, I did, and they said, oh, you do music as well, do you?
That must have been pleasing, no? Would you be interested, or could you write a hit single? I mean, like #1, I mean...
I shouldn't think I could, no. I think that's a real special talent. I have co-written a few hit singles, but
Right.
I've never written one all on my own. And I think maybe that does require a particular special talent, just like writing a hit soap opera does, you know.
Right.
I couldn't do that either. Mine would be full of sort of boring conversations, I'm sure, and not very many scandalous affairs.
I read somewhere that you said he's tried to define culture as something that we don't desperately need, or something that's like surplus to our, I don't know, maybe I'm paraphrasing it wrongly.
What I think we're doing is we're using culture as a kind of simulator. So to have my hair cut in a certain way is asking myself the question, what would it be like to be the kind of person who has this kind of haircut? What would it be like to be the kind of person who wears this kind of coat, this kind of beret? So what that allows me to do for a while is to slip into an identity of some kind, to test that identity out, to see what it's like to be that person in this world. If I go to see a Rambo film, for example, what I look at is a theory of what a world is like and what a person could be like within that world, what a man's values should be, sort of thing. And so going to see that film, I test out that experience. I see whether I agree with it or not. I see whether I agree with the picture of the world or with the picture of the man depicted in it. Now, okay, so what's the use of all that? The use of all that is that it develops the thing, I believe, which humans, for which humans are especially well designed and which makes us different from other animals. It develops a thing called empathy. Empathy is my ability to understand not only the world that I see, but when I'm talking to you, the world that you might be seeing, the world that he might be seeing. What I'm trying to say is that culture is the way that we constantly rehearse this process of being able to understand other world pictures, being able to be other identities for a while.
If you hadn't left Roxy Music, today you'd be churning out album after album, living a life of a rock star, tours and all that. Instead, you chose to produce records for other people like Nico, U2, Talking Heads. Do you sometimes regret you've chosen the less glamorous path? Or, I mean, do you have any regrets about that?
No, none whatsoever. First of all, Roxy Music was really an aberration in my life. It was not like anything else I've ever done before or since. In that, you know, I came out of art school excited about rock music because that seemed to be the place at the end of the 60s where things were happening, much more than painting. Painting was just, if you remember, was just moving into being conceptual art then, and involved more and more removal from the sensual aspects of work. And rock music was coming to life, and a lot of young artists were moving into it. Pete Townsend was a good example, John Lennon, you know. So that seemed to be the place where you could be an artist in an exciting new way. Well, I think it is, but I don't think doing world tours is particularly much a part of that. And the rock star part, though I enjoyed it for a couple of years and made the best of it, you know, I was very, very glad to get out of that. And particularly glad because the last year I was in Roxy Music, we toured for 10 months. And I can't remember in that 1 year having a single thought of any interest whatsoever. And it came to a head when we were performing once some big show somewhere. And I used to do backing vocals on some of the songs. I was standing at the front of the stage singing, and I realized that what I was thinking about was my laundry. And I thought, this really isn't what I want to be doing for a living. If I'm going to be so uninvolved in the thing as this. And so I left and was very glad to have left and have pretty much enjoyed myself ever since, you know.
Do you have any problems working with a band like U2 that is all about being rock stars and mass audiences, arms being lifted, and I mean, for me that has something disturbing. I mean, like.
Well, they're very interesting problems. I can't say that there are no problems, but they're the most interesting problems I can think of, really, because they keep asking this question that we discussed earlier of where is culture at the moment? You know, is it still in the hands of a few people who make expensive objects and for a few other people, or is it in the hands also of people who make things for millions and millions of people? Where is our culture now being generated? And I must say I'm very, very happy to have a finger on that pulse.
You once said that nothing excites you more than work. I mean, is work some sort of an escape, or is it, or if it is, escape from what?
You know, if I'm not working, I feel ill most of the time, I've realized. When I'm working hard and enjoying my work, I don't notice that I've got aches and pains. Now, that isn't the reason I work, actually. It's not like a kind of aspirin for me. But I just notice this more and more, that when I stop, I suddenly feel sort of miserable in a, in a slightly discontented way, you know. And I think working for me is just the conversation I keep having, and I'm kind of lonely without it, really, I think. And I don't think of myself as a workaholic in that I'm not obsessed in that kind of hysterical way that people sometimes are. But I'm just very happy when I'm doing something.
There was this nice anecdote about you working very hard for a deadline, and you kept your deadline, but then the record company wanted to delay the release, and you told them this is not a June album, it's an April one, and you withdrew it. Is that true?
That's true, yes. Yeah, because I think a deadline is part of the work, you know. If somebody said to you, build me a chair in a week, you would think differently than if they said, build me a chair in a year, wouldn't you? It wouldn't be the same thing.
What happened to it? I mean,
it sits on my shelf.
Right.
Maybe one day someone will bootleg it.
Right. When you traveled the world and you went to different places, did you ever come across a philosophy or a religion or a cult that you were attracted to?
Never.
Good.
I suppose the closest I ever got was in the 60s, being interested in Zen via John Cage's involvement in it. Zen was a very good philosophy for the 60s, really. Since then, I have not been interested in any kind of religious experience, really.
Is family life important to you? Do you have children, family? Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Family life is... I've just got a sort of a new family now. I have a daughter of 25 years old. So she was born when I was still at art college. As you? Yes, she's nearly my age, yes. And then I lived sort of as a bachelor for a very long time, until I was 40. And now I have two young children, a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. Yeah, and they're very important to me. In fact, they're the just about the only kind of anchorage that I've ever gratefully accepted, I think. So I tend now to plan my time in terms of how long it leaves me to spend with them. So I sometimes turn down very attractive projects because it means I won't see them for a long time.
Do you mind if music, or if your music, is used as background to other activities?
No, I don't mind at all. In fact, I sort of specifically suggested that people could do that. I think that's a perfectly honourable role for a composer, to create music that people can use. And It's funny that this again brings up this fine art design question, because if you said to a painter, do you mind if people sort of copy that and use it for wallpaper, the reaction would be, of course not, this is a painting, you know. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. You know, there are lots of ways of using something, and if you're frightened that using music in that way is going to make it lose its power, then don't use it that way. You know, I have a record that is one of my favorite records that I've deliberately never owned because I didn't want to hear it too often. I wanted to...
Which one was it?
It's the third Velvet Underground album. It's just a fabulous record, I think. And it made a huge impact on me when I heard it. And it has done ever since. And I've not heard it very many times because I've never bought a copy of it.
Which one is that?
It has the song What Goes On.
Right.
Pale Blue Eyes, Candy Says,
yeah.
those ones. It's the quieter of the three records. And I think started a whole school of music, which really has only flourished in the last 8 or 10 years, I suppose. Well, I never wanted that record to become background music, so I never used it as such. But then other things, I think, fine, use them as background music. There's no... It's not an insult to the music to do that, I think.
Right. One thing I want to know, have you really used the fountain?
Yes, yes.
You have.
That was a good story, yes.
And shall we break the code here? Because I think most people won't understand what...
Right.
Unless you tell them.
Well, the story is that in 1913, Marcel Duchamp exhibited a urinal, which he called the fountain. And it was the first objet trouvé, or ready-made. I don't know which one it was, actually. One of the two. And it was very notorious for sort of opening up a new idea in art, actually, that the artist was not necessarily somebody who made something, but somebody who recognized something, somebody who created an art experience by naming it as such. Now, this ready-made was on show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I was due to give a lecture there called High Art, Low Art. And there it was, sitting in the museum. I'd seen it already at the Sao Paulo Biennale 4 years before. I'd seen it in London 12 years before that. And I thought, how ridiculous that this particular piss pot gets carried around the world at, it costs about $30,000 or $40,000 to insure it every time it travels. I thought, how absolutely stupid. The whole message of this work is you can take any object and put it in a gallery. It doesn't have to be that one. That's losing the point completely. And this seemed to me an example of the art world once again covering itself by drawing a fence around that thing, saying, this isn't just any ordinary piss pot. This is the one, the special one, the one that is worth all this money. So I thought somebody should piss in that thing to sort of bring it back to where it belonged. So I decided it had to be me.
What happened then?
What happened was that it was exhibited in the gallery. Of course, it was behind bulletproof glass with guards standing everywhere. And the glass was very thick, but it was made in sheets that didn't quite meet. There was a very small gap in between. And I looked at this gap and I decided that I couldn't actually get my organ through the gap.
You have to aim.
Well, I couldn't even aim because it was actually about that far away. All right. I thought, no, I don't have the power at my age to reach the thing. So what I did, I went to a plumbing supply shop, and I bought some very thin plastic tube and a long piece of wire, which I put down the middle of the tube to keep it stiff. And then I filled the tube with urine in a manner that I shan't describe in detail.
Right, okay.
And I hid it down my trousers and kept my finger over the end, you know, like a pipette.
Yeah.
Right. And then I went into the museum and I stood close to the glass, and there was a guard right behind me. I could see him in the glass. And I took it out and got it through the glass, fed it through, and then just let the piss out.
Right.
So it's a bit of a fake, really. I didn't physically do it in there. But.
Right.
And then that evening in my talk, I announced to the trustees of the museum that I had just done it, and I showed diagrams of how I'd done it.
Why do you think Britain is in a chronic state of hard times? Do you think it's because it's the end of the empire, or do you think it's the wrong political decisions, or the class structure maybe? Or I mean, why do you think England is so poorly?
Well, I have a lot of theories about this.
That's one.
I think England had a very easy ride for a long time because we were living on virtually free materials, which we ripped off from the rest of the world. You know, you must remember at the turn of the century, I think 27% of the Earth's surface was British. We had almost unlimited free raw materials, and we had the first industrial revolution. So we were very, very well equipped to make things that were competitive. This had nothing to do with good management. It was all to do, I think, with ingenuity in the invention stage and cheap raw materials. Well, we don't have cheap raw materials anymore, but in the meantime, we haven't evolved a good management class either. Other countries have, you know, Sweden, Japan, Germany, even Italy, for instance, which we must remember, Italy's economy 40 years ago was smaller than that of Uruguay or Argentina. Italy is a major, it's a bigger economy than ours now. So what we've seen is us slipping down the ladder and everyone else apparently moving up. And I think this really is to do with the class system. To address one of the other things you mentioned, we have entirely built a structure that is based on deference. Deference to people with titles, deference to people with particular educations rather than others, deference to certain types of skill, particularly paper-pushing skills. Now, the societies that I would claim are successful post-industrial societies are based more on respect than deference. They're based on respect for skills and abilities, talents. I think we are in the position that we deserve to be in, quite honestly.
So what are we actually going to see? More homeless people, more... do you have an image of what's going to happen when we say it's going to go down? Do you fear what's going...
I'm sure the societies of the future are not... might even not be European particularly, but I'm sure that they're not like British society is now. And I am worried about a society that's based on such an ungenerous attitude culturally as ours is. Monetarism, the great philosophy of the 80s, has produced very poor results, I think. If money is the only thing you're interested in, it's not hard to earn, it's not hard to get. Knock old ladies over the head, you know. If money is all you want, if that's your only criterion, then you get a certain kind of society. But the societies we find ourselves admiring now clearly aren't motivated only by that. They're motivated by the desire to create culture, to create something great, something big.
And to bring it back to your field, do you think music, art has a role? Do you believe it has a role?
Yes, very much. I think what I was saying earlier about the creation of empathy is the creation of the ability to understand other views of the world and to value them as well. To say, okay, that's the world you live in. It's not the same as mine, but we can negotiate. We can negotiate. We don't have to decide who's right. We have to decide how we could live next to one another, you know. It's not a question of me or you. We're both here. And I think, I hope that the experience of culture in general creates a feeling for that kind of attitude. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be part of.
Well, I enjoyed the interview very much. I never met Brian before, and I imagined him totally different. I imagined him a little harder, more remote, and he was really a pleasure to talk to. And I mean, the softness of his manner made his ideas somehow stronger and better, because he couldn't be accused of being a hard intellectual, but I talked to a real nice person. So I enjoyed it. I hope you will as well.